2 copper marks. That was what he had in his palm, warm from the ride, and warmer still from the way his hand had closed around them through the entire approach to the border market. 2 copper marks, a thumbprint of dried blood on the rim of one, a chip in the milled edge of the other. Kratos rolled them between his fingers without looking down, the way another man might count the beads of a prayer rope. He did not pray. He had not for a long time. But he counted these, the first coin for the man who had taught him to forge a collar that would not break, the second for the man he had been when he learned. He stood at the back of the crowd with his hood low and the coins burning against the line of his palm, and across the trampled clay of the auction yard, on the splintered platform where they put the lot they wanted to be done with quickly, a girl was being prodded forward by a chain looped to her wrists. She did not flinch when the prod touched her shoulder. She did not flinch at all. That was what he marked first, not her hair, which was wet and dark to the scalp, not the bruise that ran from her temple into the collar of her shift, not the mud on her bare feet. The stillness of her, the way no part of her moved that did not have to. She held her chin at the precise angle of someone who had decided long ago that begging cost more than it was worth. He felt the 2 coins shift in his hand. He had paid more than this for a meal yesterday. He had paid more than this for a horseshoe nail. The auctioneer was a thick-shouldered man with a brand on the inside of his right wrist, a small iron crescent burned over a scar shaped like a star. Kratos had seen that brand before, in a forge yard in the south, when he was 22 and obedient, and had not yet learned the difference between an order and a sin. He knew the wrist, he knew the crescent, he knew the man under the brand vaguely, the way one knows a tool one has used until the handle wears to the shape of one's grip. The auctioneer cleared his throat and read out her lot. Marsh clan stock, female, healer trained, unmarked. He paused on that word, the way a man pauses when he is about to drive a knife in slowly. Unmarked, he repeated, and turned her chin with the back of his hand so the crowd could see the long line of her neck, pale and clean of any mating bite, any claim, any sign that she had ever been wanted enough to keep. A hollow vessel, the auctioneer said pleasantly. No wolf, no worth, but a strong back, a quiet mouth, and 2 good hands that know herbs. Open at 1 silver. Some men in the crowd laughed. Others looked away. Kratos did neither. He watched her face and saw nothing land there at the word hollow, because she had heard it so many times it had worn a smooth groove in her. And he understood that groove the way a smith understands a wear pattern in a blade. He had one of his own. The auctioneer waited a beat, then a beat too long, and the silver did not come. He dropped to half. He dropped to a quarter. The crowd shifted, restless, embarrassed for him, and the girl on the platform did not move except to breathe, and her breath was so shallow, Kratos had to look hard to see it at all. 10 copper, the auctioneer said, his voice tightening. 5 copper. Surely 5. A man at the front spat into the dust. The auctioneer's jaw worked. He looked at the girl, and his face went ugly, and Kratos saw him decide to make her cheap for spite, the way men did when their pride had been rubbed with a coarse cloth. 3 copper, he snapped. 3 for the marsh stock. Last call before I throw her in with a lot of broken pots out back. Kratos stepped forward. He did not raise his hand. He did not raise his voice. He walked the length of the cleared aisle with his hood still up and the coin still warm, and the crowd parting around him because something in his stride told them to. And he stopped at the foot of the platform and laid the 2 copper marks down on the worn wood at the auctioneer's feet. 2, he said. The auctioneer stared. The bid is 3, he said. Kratos did not look up. He looked at the brand on the auctioneer's wrist instead, and the auctioneer saw him looking and went a shade paler under his weather. "Toooo," Kratos said again, and his voice was the kind of quiet that travels. "The brand on your wrist was put there in a forge in Velmar in the year of the second snow. I know the smith. I know the order it was given under. I know what coin you took to wear it. You will accept 2 for this lot, or I will tell every man in this yard the rest of what I know. And you will not auction another thing in this market by sundown." Silence. The kind of silence where 100 people remember at the same time that they are breathing. The auctioneer's mouth opened and closed. He looked at the coins. He looked at the girl. He looked at Kratos' face, finally, fully, and something in his throat moved like a swallowed nail. "Sold," he said. 2 copper. Get her off my platform." Kratos picked up the coins. He held them out, and the auctioneer's own hand had to come down to take them. And that was the part Kratos had walked all morning for, the small public ugliness of it, the man's fingers closing around the insult in front of every witness. Then he turned to the girl, and for the first time her eyes lifted, and what he saw in them was not gratitude. It was the long, level look of someone deciding whether you were a different shape of the same knife. She did not speak. He did not ask her to. He held out his hand for the chain, and the auctioneer's boy unhooked it from the ring and gave it over, and Kratos walked her down off the platform without a word, and when they reached the edge of the crowd, she said, in a voice rougher than he expected and lower, "You'll regret this. I won't obey." He glanced at her. The hood shattered his eyes. "Good," he said. "I wasn't buying that." The market behind the platform was a warren of stalls and lean-tos and chained things, and Kratos did not let go of the chain, and Athena did not ask him to. They walked through it the way 2 people walk through a place neither of them owns, alert at the shoulders, careful with the feet. She had not asked his name. He had not given it. The chain between them was light in his hand because he had not set his weight against it once, and she noted that and filed it and did not let it mean anything yet. She was counting the exits. She was counting the guards. She was counting the children. There were 3 at the front gate, 2 at the side. There was 1 at the back, behind a slat of canvas, sitting on the ground with his back against a post. And when she passed close enough to see him, she stopped. Kratos stopped a half step later, because the chain told him she had. He looked where she was looking. The boy was perhaps 6. He was small for 6. He was Marsh clan. She could tell from the dark of his hair and the cut of his cheekbone, and the wet leaf green of the cloth tied around his wrist, the kind her aunt had used to wrap newborns. He had a chain on his ankle and a bruise on his mouth, and his eyes when they found her face went very wide and very still, the way a fawn's go when it understands that the thing in front of it is not a threat, but is also not, yet, a rescue. She knew him. She did not know his name. She knew the cloth. She knew the cheekbone. She knew the way his hand came up off his knee in a small pressed palm shape against his chest. Fingers flat, thumb tucked. The Marsh clan sign for here. I am here. He had not made a sound. She named the boy first, in her head, but later. For now she turned to Kratos and did not lower her voice. "The boy," she said. He looked at the boy. He looked at her. He did not ask why. He walked back to the auctioneer, and Athena watched him go and was surprised to find that she trusted, in the small, narrow corner of her where trust still fit, that he would come back. He came back. The auctioneer trailed after him, sweating now, and unhooked the boy's ankle himself with hands that were not quite steady. Kratos did not pay this time. He simply waited, and the auctioneer did not ask him to. The brand on the wrist had bought more than 2 coppers worth of fear. The boy did not run to her. He walked, and he reached her. He put his small hand flat against the side of her hand, palm pressed, and left it there. He did not look up. She crouched. She did not touch him yet. She put her own palm flat on the dirt beside his foot, fingers spread, the Marsh Clan sign for, "I see you, I am with you." His hand on her thigh tightened. That was all. It was enough. She straightened, and the chain on her wrists clinked, and Kratos saw the clink register on the boy's face like a struck bell. And without speaking, he reached into his coat and took out a small folding knife and went to one knee in the dirt and worked the pin out of the cuff at her wrist. It took him a long minute. He did not hurry. He did not look at her face while he did it. The cuff fell away. The boy watched it fall and did not flinch when it hit the ground. Kratos put the knife away and stood. "The other cuff," she said. He did the other cuff. They walked out of the market together, the 3 of them, and no one stopped them, because the auctioneer had gone very interested in a wineskin behind his counter and did not look up. The road outside the market was rutted and cold, and the late autumn light was the color of weak tea. Kratos had a horse tied at the second post, a heavy gray thing with a scar across its nose, and he lifted the boy onto its back without asking, and the boy did not protest, and did not, Athena noticed, look surprised. He had been lifted onto horses before, probably by men who had not meant kindness. She walked at the horse's shoulder, and Kratos walked at its head, and the silence between them was not companionable, but it was not hostile either, which was, in her experience, a kind of silence she had not often had. She broke it because she wanted to know the shape of him. "Why?" she said. He did not pretend not to understand. "Because the auctioneer needed to be insulted in public," he said, "and the price needed to be low enough that the insult landed." She let that sit. It was not the answer she had expected. It was, in fact, almost the truth. She could feel the rest of it under it like the second layer of a folded cloth. "So I was a tool," she said. He glanced at her then. The hood was pushed back now, and she could see his face for the first time fully. And it was a face that had been beautiful once, and was now mostly carved, the way wood gets carved by water over a long time. "Yes," he said, "and no. The yes is the part you'll believe today. The no is the part I'll have to earn." She did not know what to do with that, so she did nothing with it. The boy reached down from the saddle and put his small hand on the top of her head, lightly, like a benediction, and left it there. She walked the rest of the road that way, with a child's hand on her hair and a stranger's horse beside her, and the place in her chest where her heartbeat used to be loudest, gone perfectly, perfectly still. His camp was a half-day's ride north of the market, set into a fold of hill where 2 streams met under a stand of black alder. He had been there a while. She could tell from the worn track to the spring, and the way the fire pit had banked itself into a shape his hand knew. There was one tent. There was one horse lying. There were no other people. She had wondered about that, on the road, and now she had her answer, and she did not know yet whether the answer was a comfort or a warning. He set the boy down off the saddle himself, hands at the small ribs, careful as if the child were made of folded paper. And the boy stood where he was put and did not move until Athena moved. And then he moved with her, half a step behind, palm reaching for the back of her hand. She let him have it. His fingers were cold. She walked him to the fire and sat him beside it, and he sat. Kratos saw to the horse. He did not speak while he did it, and she watched the shape of him work, and noticed that he did not hum, did not whistle, did not make any of the small, unconscious sounds men make when they are alone with an animal they like. He worked in silence the way she breathed in silence. It was not absence of sound, it was a held thing. After the horse was seen to, he came to the fire and crouched on the other side of it, far enough that the boy did not have to track him with his eyes, and he laid out food. Bread, hard cheese, 2 apples, a strip of dried meat that he cut into smaller and smaller pieces with the same folding knife he had used on her cuffs. He gave the smallest pieces to the boy. He gave the bread to her. He took an apple for himself and ate half of it and put the other half in his pocket, the way a man does who has learned not to finish food in case the night is longer than he plans. She ate carefully. The boy ate with the silent efficiency of a child who has learned that food disappears if you hesitate. Kratos watched the fire, not them. After a while, he said, without looking up, "My name is Kratos." She considered not giving hers. She gave it anyway. "Athena," she said. He nodded once. "The boy," she said, "doesn't talk." Kratos nodded again. "I noticed." "He has signs," she said. "Marsh Clan signs. He uses his hand." Kratos finally looked at her, and his eyes in the firelight were the color of wet slate. "Teach me one," he said. She blinked. The request was so plain it took her a moment to find an edge on it. There wasn't one. She held up her own hand and made the sign for safe, fingers loose, palm down, lowered slowly toward the ground, like setting something fragile on a shelf. "Safe," she said. He copied it. His hand was much larger than hers, and the gesture looked strange on him, too gentle for the bones of his fingers, but he did it correctly the first time. The boy watched. The boy did not sign back, but his shoulders, which had been up around his ears since the market, came down a fraction of an inch. That was the thing about marsh children. They listened with their shoulders. Kratos saw it. He did not comment. He turned back to the fire. Later, when the boy had fallen asleep against her side, with his thumb tucked into the hem of her sleeve, Kratos spoke again, lower this time, the kind of low that does not wake a child. "There's a thing I have to say," he said. "I would rather say it now than have you find it later." She waited. He turned the half-eaten apple in his pocket. She could hear the small rasp of his thumb across its skin. "The collar that took your wolf," he said. "The metal in it, I know the alloy. I forged the first batch, 12 years ago, in Velmar, under commission. I did not know what they were for. That is not an excuse. I learned what they were for inside a year, and I kept forging them for 2 more before I stopped. The man who paid me had paid my father before me. I stopped because of a thing that happened in a village west of here. Not because I grew a conscience early. The conscience came after. I have not made one in 9 years. I have spent some of those years finding the men who placed the orders and making sure they cannot place more. The auctioneer wore one of those orders on his wrist. That is how I knew his brand. That is how I knew the price of insulting him. That is also why the coins were 2 and not 3. I wanted him to take a number from me that would feel, for the rest of his life, like the number a man pays for a thing he has thrown away. "And I wanted you," he said and stopped. He looked at the fire. He started again. "I wanted you off that platform," he said, "because no one else was going to take you off it. And because if no one took you off it, the auctioneer would have used you, the way men use the lot they cannot sell, and because—" He stopped again, "and because I have spent 9 years not undoing what I did," he said. "And tonight was the closest I have come." She did not speak for a long time. The boy breathed against her ribs. The fire popped. She thought about the cold on her neck where the metal had sat for 6 years and then been pried off and thrown in a ditch when her clan dissolved, and how the cold had stayed even after the metal was gone. and how she had thought the cold was the absence of the wolf she had never had, and how it might, possibly, be something else entirely. "I'm not going to forgive you tonight," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not sure I'm going to forgive you ever," she said. "I know," he said. "But I'm not going to leave tonight either," she said. He let out a breath. It was not relief. It was something steadier, the way a man breathes who has been holding a heavy thing and has set it down on the level place. "Good," he said. "Sleep. I'll watch the fire." She slept. The boy slept against her. Kratos watched the fire. The place in her chest where her heartbeat used to be loudest stayed still, and she dreamed, for the first time in 6 years, of green water moving under reeds. The 7 nights of the old culling moon are the nights Athena's clan, when there had been a clan, used to count on a notched stick of black willow. The first night was for fasting. The second was for the naming of names. The third, the fourth, the fifth were for the children who had not turned, the children to be examined, the children to be reckoned with by the elders. The 6th was for the call. The 7th was for the burning of the stick. Athena had been on the 3rd night 6 years ago, when her own name was called. She had stood in front of the elders with her hands folded the way her mother had taught her, and she had not turned, and they had not killed her, because her mother had begged on her knees in the mud, and the elders had compromised on a collar instead of a knife. And the collar had come from a southern smith whose name no one in the clan knew. She had worn it from the 3rd night of the culling moon in her 13th year, until the night the raiders came and broke the clan apart, and one of them, looking for something more valuable underneath, had wrenched it off her throat with a pry bar and tossed it into the reeds, because it was not silver. She had been on the road for 11 days after that. She had been on the platform that morning. Tonight, sitting beside Kratos' banked fire with the boy curled against her, was the 2nd night, the naming of names. She did not say this aloud. She did not need to. The moon overhead was the right shape, and the cold in her neck was the right cold, and the silence in her chest, where the absent sat, was the silence of a thing that knows it is being measured. She named the boy first. She named him in her head, because she did not know his given name and could not ask him for it, and she did not want to call him boy any longer. She named him Wren, because the Marsh clan word for small reed was Wren-I, and she did not have the heart for the whole word. Then she named her brother. His name was Norwood, and she did not know if he was alive, and she had not let herself say his name in 11 days, because saying it had felt like making a hole in herself she could not seal. She said it now, silently, into the dark. Norwood. 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 3 times, like the elders did, like a name had to be earned by repetition. Then she named her mother, and her aunt, and the woman who had taught her which moss to put on a wound and which to keep for tea, and the cousin who had laughed too loud, and the old man who had carved her a wooden frog when she was 4. She named them all. She did not cry. The naming was older than crying. When she was done, she sat for a long time with her hand on Wren's hair and her eyes on the fire, and Kratos, on the other side of it, did not interrupt, because he had seen, somewhere along the way, what she was doing, even if he did not know the ritual, and he had the wit to leave a person alone with their dead. After a while, he got up to add wood to the fire, and when he sat down again, it was on her side, 3 feet away, his back to the same log. He did not lean toward her. He did not speak. He simply moved closer, the way a man moves who wants to be in reach without being in the way. The cold in her neck eased a fraction. She did not know what to make of that. She did not, yet, try to. In the morning he made tea over the fire, and she drank it, and Ren drank it, and Kratos drank his own. And then he said, without preamble, "There is something we need to do today, and you need to decide if you want to do it." She waited. He set his cup down. "The auctioneer," he said, "took a delivery yesterday. 3 wagons. He would not have wanted to auction your lot quickly if he did not have a larger lot coming. The wagons came in last night after we left. I have a man who watches the road for me. He saw them. They were Marsh clan." Athena went very still. Ren, who had been chewing a corner of bread, stopped chewing. "He has them in the back stalls," Kratos said. 20, maybe 25. The auction is set for the 6th night. That is 5 nights from now." She looked at the fire. She looked at Ren. She looked at Kratos. "Why are you telling me?" she said. He held her eyes. "Because I am going to take the stalls down on the 5th night," he said. "And you should know what is in them before I do it, in case there is a name in there you want to call out before the door comes off." She put her cup down very carefully, because her hand had begun to shake, and she did not want him to see it shake into the cup. "There is a name," she said. He nodded. He waited. "Norwood," she said. "My brother. He was 16 when the raiders came. He would be 17 now. He had a scar on his collarbone from a fishhook and a way of laughing that—" She stopped. She did not need to give him the laugh. He would know him by the scar. Kratos nodded again. "If he is in there," he said, "I will bring him out. If he is not, I will tell you he is not. I will not lie to you about it." She believed him. She did not know why she believed him. She believed him anyway. Ren, beside her, lifted his hand and made a small sign, palm flat, thumb tucked, fingers angled in toward his own chest. And Athena translated without thinking. "Me too." "Me too what, Ren?" she said softly. He pressed his hand against his chest harder. "Me," the sign meant. Me in there. Me in the stalls. She understood. He had been in there himself. He had names of his own. She closed her hand around his small fist and held it. And Kratos watched them both, and his face did not move, and the place in her chest where her heartbeat used to live stayed still. And underneath the stillness, very faintly, the way a stone in a riverbed feels the river before the river rises, something else began to listen. The 3rd night they spent in the camp, Kratos drilled. He drilled in the small clearing behind the tent where the grass was worn, and he drilled in silence, the way he did everything, with a long blade in one hand and a short blade in the other. And Athena watched from the fire, because she had not seen a man move like that, and she wanted to understand the shape of what she was traveling with. He moved without flourish. There were no spins, no display cuts, no stamps. He moved the way water moves around a stone, finding the line of least resistance, then committing to it absolutely. When he stopped, he was not breathing hard. He sheathed the blades and walked to the spring, and drank from his cupped hands, and came back and sat by the fire. And Ren, who had watched the whole drill from inside the tent flap, came out and sat between them, with the small certainty of a child who had decided in some private accounting that the space between these 2 adults was the safest square of ground in the world. Athena set herbs to dry on a flat stone. She had asked Kratos for the small linen pouch in his saddlebag, and he had given it without question. And inside it she had found, of all things, a pressed sprig of marsh thyme. And she had not asked why a southern smith carried marsh thyme in his saddlebag, because she suspected the answer would tell her more about him than he was ready to give. The 4th night, she spoke. She told him about her mother. She told him about the collar. She told him about the day they had put it on her, the way the metal had felt against her throat like a bracelet of cold stones, the way her mother had wept and her aunt had not, the way the smith, a southern man, traveling with a brand on the inside of his right wrist, had said, "This won't hurt the child, only the wolf." And her mother had said, "She has no wolf." And the smith had said, "Then it won't hurt anything at all," and snapped it shut. Kratos listened with his hands loose on his knees and his face very still. When she was done, he said, "The smith was named Haley. He was my mother's cousin. He died of a fever in the 4th winter after that commission. I was at his bedside. He did not ask for forgiveness. I would not have given it." She nodded. The naming of names continued then, and her brother's name was on it, and the smith Haley's name was on it, and the auctioneer's name, which she did not yet know, would be on it before the moon was done. The 5th night came. They left Ren with an old woman in a cottage 2 miles from the market, a woman Kratos called Adele, and who looked at him without surprise, and at Athena with a long, considering gaze, and at Ren with the bright, direct kindness of a person who has raised many children, not her own. Adele put Ren on her hearth bench and gave him a bowl of milk, and spoke to him in the marsh tongue, low and gentle, and Ren, who had not made a sound in any of their hearing, made a small sound then, a wordless, soft hum into the bowl. Athena's throat closed. She kissed the top of his head and signed, "I will come back." He signed back, "I know." They rode to the market in the dark. Kratos had 3 men waiting in the alder copse a 1/4 mile out. Quiet men, older, with the same carved-by-water look he had, and he spoke to them in clipped half-sentences, and they nodded and split and went their separate ways. He walked her to the back of the auctioneer's compound himself. The plan was not complicated. 2 of his men would take the front gate, 1 would take the side. He would take the back stalls with her, because she would know the names and the faces. The auctioneer would be sleeping above the front office. He would wake. He would not wake well. The compound smelled of iron and rotting straw, and the particular sour sweat of people kept in the dark too long. The lock on the back stall door was the kind of lock Kratos had taught himself to open in under 20 seconds when he was 19 and angry about different things. He opened it in 12. The door swung. Inside was a long, low room with 2 rows of cells, and the cells held people, and the people, when the door opened, did not cry out, because they had learned not to. Athena stepped inside with a small lantern shaded to a slit, and she walked the rows, and she looked at every face. Norwood was in the 4th cell on the left. He was sitting against the back wall with his knees drawn up, and his hair had been cut short, and his eyes, when the lantern light touched them, did not light up, did not widen, did not do any of the things a brother's eyes are supposed to do. He looked at her the way a man looks at a hallucination he has had before. He did not stand up. "Norwood," she said. Her voice came out of her like a thing she had been keeping in a jar. He blinked. He worked his mouth. "Athena," he said. His voice was not the voice she remembered. It was thinner, as if some part of him had been drained off, and what was left had been topped up with water. "Stand up," she said. "We're getting you out." He stood up. He was slow about it. He moved the way a man moves who has been fed something that is not food. She looked at his neck and saw the band there, not the same metal as her old collar, but its cousin, thinner, riveted, a working band rather than a culling one, and she understood, in a single cold drop, what they had been doing with him. They had been using him. They had been bleeding him. The band was not to suppress a wolf. It was to keep something else docile. The gift she had carried buried in herself her whole life. He had carried a smaller measure of the same one, and they had found it, and they had drawn on it. And what was left of him was what was left when a vein has been opened too many times. Kratos came up behind her. He saw the band, his mouth set. He had a small file in his coat. He filed the rivet in 3 strokes and lifted the band off Norwood's neck, and Norwood swayed, and Athena caught him under the arm, and he leaned his weight on her and whispered against her ear, "You came, you came, you came." Like a child reciting a charm, and her chest, which had been still for so long it had forgotten how to be anything else, did not break. It listened. They got 14 people out of the back stalls. 6 were Marsh Clan, 8 were not. 2 of the cells were empty, and 1 held a body that had been dead 2 days. And Athena said the name on that body herself, because she had known the woman, and it was an old woman whose hands had taught her to splint a finger when she was 9. She closed the woman's eyes. She straightened. She walked out. The 5th night ended with the back stalls empty and a wagon rattling north under one of Kratos' men, with 14 people inside it, including her brother, who could not yet stand without help, and the auctioneer, somewhere above in the dark of his office, still alive and still asleep, because Kratos had said plainly, "I'm not killing him on a night you and I can both go home from." The 6th night was for the call. The 7th was for the burning. There were 2 nights left. The 6th night, the auctioneer woke up. He woke up the way a man wakes up when something heavy and wrong has happened in his house, and he came down his back stairs with a knife in one hand and a pistol in the other. And what he found was an empty back stall block, and Kratos sitting at the foot of his stairs with his elbows on his knees, and Athena standing in the open doorway with the lantern still in her hand. He raised the pistol. Kratos did not move. "Don't," Athena said. The auctioneer fired. The pistol misfired. He had not cleaned it in a month, and Kratos, who had spent the previous hour in the office quietly seeing to small things like that, had cleaned it for him in a way the man would not approve of. The auctioneer threw the pistol. He came down the stairs with the knife. Kratos stood up and took the knife away from him with one hand and put him on his back on the floorboards with the other, and the auctioneer lay there blinking at the ceiling with his breath knocked out of him and said, in a high, thin voice, "Who paid you?" "No one," Kratos said. He sat down on the man's chest. The auctioneer wheezed. He looked at Athena. "The Hollow Girl," he said. "The Hollow Girl did this." Kratos hit him once, hard, on the side of the jaw, not to break it, only to make it stop saying that word. The auctioneer's head rocked. He did not speak again. Kratos got up. He pulled the man to his feet and walked him out into the yard, and Athena followed, because she had decided that whatever happened, she would witness it. The yard was empty. The other stalls were empty. Kratos' men had emptied them an hour ago. The auctioneer stood swaying in the cold dirt and looked around, and understood, slowly, the size of what had been done to him. "The call is tonight," Athena said. The auctioneer turned to her, his mouth opened. "The call is tonight," she said again, in the Marsh Clan rhythm, the rhythm her mother had used at the 3rd night 6 years ago. "You have brought every condition for it." Kratos did not interrupt. He stood at her shoulder with his hands at his sides. The auctioneer laughed. It was a thin, scraping laugh. "You don't have a wolf," he said. "You don't have anything. You are the thing they collared and threw away. You have no—" And then he stopped, because behind her, behind both of them, the back gate of his compound had opened, and through it had come a man on a tall, pale horse. And behind that man, 6 riders, and the lead rider's face under the moon was a face the auctioneer knew, and Kratos knew. and Athena did not. The lead rider was a woman. She wore a high-collared coat the color of dried blood, and her hair was the color of late wheat, and she rode the way nobility rides, balanced and indifferent. She drew up at the edge of the yard and looked down at the three of them, and her eyes found Kratos first, and then the auctioneer, and then Athena, in that order, and the order was a sentence in itself. "Surely," Kratos said. The woman smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Kratos," she said, "you took my delivery." "Your delivery," Kratos repeated, very flat. "The wagons last night," Shirley said. "I paid for those. I had buyers." "You have cost me a great deal of money and a small amount of dignity, which I value more." The auctioneer moved against Athena's grip, and Athena tightened her hand on his arm, and he subsided. "So you are the order," Athena said. Shirley's eyes came back to her. She tilted her head the way a hawk does. "I am the buyer," she said. "There is a difference, although I doubt you care." Athena said nothing. Shirley dismounted. She walked across the yard the way a woman walks who has never once in her life been afraid of the ground she walks on. She stopped 6 feet from them. She looked at Athena's neck, the bare, unmarked line of it, and her smile sharpened. "You are the Marsh clan healer," she said. "The hollow one. I had heard of you. I had wondered if you were the one." Athena did not understand. She would not understand for another 2 minutes. Shirley turned to the auctioneer. "You sold her," she said. "To him for 2 coppers. The auctioneer's face crumpled. Shirley turned back to Kratos. "You knew," she said. "You knew what she was. That is why you bought her. That is why you took the wagons. That is why you have been a thorn in my back for 9 years. You are not a conscience, Kratos. You are a thief." Kratos did not answer. He did not need to. Shirley looked at Athena and her face went, for a moment, almost gentle. "Child," she said, "do you know what your bloodline is?" Athena said, "I know what my clan said it was. Hollow." Shirley laughed. "Oh no," she said. "Oh child, no. Your bloodline is older than every wolf in this country. Your bloodline is what the wolves were made to hunt. Your bloodline used to walk into a battlefield and unmake the corruption in the men on it, and the men with the wolves resented that very much because their wars depended on the corruption staying put. Your bloodline was hunted to almost extinction 4 centuries ago. The collars were not made to stop wolves you don't have. The collars were made to stop the gift you do have. Your clan did not exile you because you failed to turn. Your clan exiled you because someone, generations ago, paid them to forget what you were and treat the children of your line as broken. Your brother was found because he had a small share of it. You are not hollow, child. You are full. You have simply been kept lidded. And I have come tonight to take the lid the rest of the way off and put what is under it into a vessel I can use. Athena did not speak. The cold in her neck, which had been a familiar cold all her life, shifted. It did not warm. It deepened, the way a still pool deepens when something underneath it begins to move. Shirley raised her hand. In her hand was a thin, curved blade the color of mercury, and Kratos at Athena's shoulder went rigid because he knew the alloy. He had forged the alloy. He had handed her the alloy 9 years ago in a lined wooden box and walked out of her hall and not slept for a week. The blade was the suppressing metal. The blade was the same metal that had sat on Athena's neck for 6 years. Shirley said, "Hold her." The 6 riders dismounted. Kratos stepped in front of Athena. What happened next happened quickly and slowly at the same time. the way violence does when the body is paying attention. Two of the riders came at Kratos, and he took the first one's wrist and broke it, and used the broken-wristed man's body as a step to put his knee into the second man's chest, and the second man went down and did not get up cleanly.
A third rider went wide, around, toward Athena. And Athena, who had spent 5 years in the marshes setting snares for fish, and had learned a thing or two about the angle of a flung weight, pulled the lantern off its hook on the post behind her and flung it at his face. It broke. Oil and flame went across his chest. He screamed. He went down rolling. 2 more came on. Kratos took one. The auctioneer, of all people, bolted, and one of Shirley's own riders, mistaking him in the dark for a defender, cut him down in 3 strides. He fell into the dirt with a sound very small for a man his size. Shirley did not move during any of this. Shirley walked. She walked toward Athena, along the line the riders made for her, and the curved blade in her hand was so still, it might have been part of her arm. The last rider closed on Kratos from behind. Kratos saw him in the reflection of his own short blade and turned, and the rider's blow caught him not in the ribs, where it was aimed, but in the thigh, deep, and Kratos went down on one knee, and the rider raised his arm to finish it, and Athena moved. She did not know she had moved until she was already moving. She crossed the 6 feet between her and Kratos with a speed that was not in her body, that had never been in her body, and she put herself between the descending blade and his bent neck, and she raised her hands, and what came out of her hands was not anything she had ever made before. It was not flame. It was not light. It was a stillness. It went out from her palms in a wide, soundless ring, and where it touched the rider's blade, the blade stopped moving in the air, suspended, as if the rider had struck the surface of a deep, deep pool that had decided in that instant not to ripple. The rider's face went white. He pulled. The blade did not come free. The stillness held it. Athena did not understand what she was doing. Her hands were cold. Her chest was cold. The place where her heartbeat used to live was the deepest cold of all. And the cold was not absence now. It was presence. And the presence was old. And the presence remembered things she did not. She turned her hands. The stillness turned with them. It rolled across the yard like the shadow of a cloud across a field. And where it passed, the corruption in things, the rust on the cell hinges, the rot in the timbers of the auction platform, the small black sickness in the wound on Kratos' thigh, went still and stopped and was unmade. The platform groaned, the hinges crumbled, the wound on Kratos' thigh closed in front of her eyes in a long, slow knit, the bad blood going out of it like ink lifting out of cloth. The riders staggered. Their blades, the ordinary steel ones, held. Shirley's blade, the suppressing one, the one Kratos had forged, did not. The mercury color in it dulled, then darkened, then went the gray of dead ash, and Shirley felt it go, and her face for the first time was the face of a woman who had not planned for this. She raised the dead blade anyway. She ran the last 3 steps. She drove the blade at Athena's heart. The blade did not go in. It struck Athena's chest and broke. It broke the way old pottery breaks, in long curved shards, and the shards fell around Athena's feet, and Shirley, carried by her own momentum, fell with them, onto her knees, her empty hand still extended. Athena looked down at her. She did not raise her hands again. She did not need to. The stillness was still in her, and she held it, the way her mother had once taught her to hold a hot pot, close, careful, with respect for what it could do. Shirley looked up at her. "The auctioneer is dead," Shirley said. Her voice was not the voice it had been. "You have nothing. Your clan is gone. Your brother is broken.
You will not survive what you just did. The gift will not settle quiet again, do you understand? It will pull on you for the rest of your life. You will never be a hollow girl in a marsh. You will be a beacon, and they will come, and they will come, and they will come. Athena heard her. Athena considered her. Then Athena said, I know. Shirley blinked. The riders, the three still standing, looked at each other and made the small, simultaneous decision that men make when their employer is on her knees with a broken weapon. They ran. They ran for their horses. They ran into the dark. Kratos, on his knee in the dirt, watched them go and did not pursue. Athena stepped past Shirley. She did not strike her. She did not need to. She walked to Kratos. She put her hands on his shoulder, and the cold in her hand was a clean cold now, not an empty one. And she said, quietly, Can you stand? He stood. He was steady. The wound on his thigh was a pale scar already, 6 years old by the look of it, a thing that had happened to a different man. He looked down at it and then up at her. Shirley, behind them, made one more sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes who has finally understood what is in the room with her. She got to her feet, and she walked, slowly, to her horse. And she tried to mount, and she could not, because the stillness Athena had laid across the yard had touched her too, and the corruption in her, and there had been a great deal of it, more than Athena had known, kept under the high collar of a coat the color of dried blood, was being unmade in her body the way it had been unmade in the timbers of the platform. She made it 3 steps from her horse. She fell. She did not get up. Athena watched her fall. Athena did not feel triumph and did not feel pity, and the absence of both surprised her, and she thought, this is what mercy without softness looks like. This is what it costs to be the one who does not strike the second blow. Kratos came to stand beside her. They looked at the woman in the yard. After a while, he said, She's gone. Athena said, I know. He said, You all right? She said, No. She said, But I will be. He did not say, I will help you be. He did not need to. He held out his hand. She took it. They walked out of the yard together, and behind them, the stillness she had let go pulled itself slowly back into the long, quiet pool of her chest, where the cold lived now, not as a wound, but as a depth, and in the deep of it, faintly, faintly, like a stone settling into a riverbed. She felt her brother's small share of the same gift wake and reach for hers, even though he was a half-day's ride north and asleep on Adele's hearth bench, with Wren tucked under his arm. The call was over. The 7th night had not yet begun. The 7th night was for the burning of the stick. Athena did not have a black willow stick. She had, instead, the broken shards of Shirley's blade in a folded cloth, and a bent rivet from her brother's neckband in her pocket, and the 2 copper coins which Kratos had given back to her, without ceremony, on the road home from the market, with no explanation except, These are yours now. They built the fire on a flat stone above the camp, where the alder gave way to open sky and the old calling moon could see down. Adele had ridden up with Wren and Norwood in a small cart, because Athena had asked her to, and because Norwood, even half restored, had insisted on standing for the last night. He stood. He stood with his hand on Wren's shoulder, because Wren had, in the day since Athena had come back, decided that Norwood was his second safe place, and Norwood, who had been so far from being anyone's safe place that he had forgotten the shape of it, had accepted the small pressed palm against his shirt with the careful astonishment of a man being given back a piece of himself. Adele had brought bread and a bottle of pale wine and a square of dark honey cake she said was for the boy, although the boy ate 3 bites and pressed the rest into Athena's hand and would not take it back.
3 of Kratos' men were there, and the 14 people from the back stalls, those who could travel, and a woman from the next valley whose mother had been Marsh clan and who had ridden all day on hearing the news. They made a circle around the fire. Athena spoke the names. She spoke them in the Marsh tongue, the one she had not used aloud in 11 days, and her voice held, and she spoke her mother's name, and her aunt's name, and the old woman in the cell, and the cousin who had laughed too loud, and the man who had carved her the wooden frog. And she spoke Haley the smith, because Kratos had taught her his name, and because the naming of names did not exclude the men who had earned a place on the stick by harm as well as by love. She spoke Shirley. She spoke the auctioneer, whose name turned out to have been Norwood as well, a coincidence that she received with a small private surprise and did not draw attention to, because the dead do not need their names braided with the dead. She spoke her brother's name, and her brother heard it, and he nodded, the small nod of a man being told he is still on the list of the living. She did not speak Kratos' name. He noticed. He did not ask. After the names, she put the broken shards of the suppressing blade in the fire, and the bent rivet, and a small twist of marsh thyme from his saddlebag pouch, which he had given her without comment. And she watched the metal go from gray to red to white, and she watched the rivet warp and the shards slump, and she felt, for the first time in her life, the cold in her neck go entirely. Not because the wolf had come back, because there had never been a wolf, but because the suppression that had followed her even after the collar was gone had finally been named and seen and burned. It did not warm. It became simply her. The depth in her chest, the stillness where her heartbeat had used to be loudest, the thing she was. Hers. She turned to Kratos. He stood at the edge of the circle, his hood down, his hands at his sides. He had not stepped into the firelight without invitation, and she understood, looking at him, that he had spent 9 years learning not to step into circles he had not been invited to. She held out her hand. He came. He stood beside her. Norwood behind her watched, and his face was not the face of a brother giving his sister away, because she was not being given. It was the face of a brother witnessing his sister claim something. Athena did not bite Kratos' neck. She did not, because the bite at the neck was a wolf's claim, and neither of them had a wolf, and the bond between them had not formed across that grammar. The bond between them had formed across the shared shape of an absence. So she took his hand instead, and turned it over, and laid her palm against his palm, and she pressed, and held. And after a moment he pressed back, and the cold in her chest met the cold in his, and the two cold places did not warm each other, and did not fill each other. They simply sat next to each other. They simply stayed still next to each other. That, she understood, was the bond. 2 stillnesses, neither one trying to make the other a noise. Kratos lowered his head. His forehead came to rest against hers. He did not speak for a long time. When he spoke, it was very low, low enough that only she could hear it. "I forged the metal that took your wolf," he said again. "I will not stop saying that. I will say it every year on this night for as long as you will let me stand in your circle." She said, "I know." She said, "You may stand in it." They stayed like that, forehead to forehead, until Ren, who had been watching them with the long patience of a child who has decided the adults in front of him are doing something serious, came around the fire and put his small palm flat against the back of Athena's hand and pressed. The Marsh clan sign for here. I am here. Athena laughed. It was the first laugh out of her in a year, and it was a small one. And Kratos did not laugh, because he did not laugh.
But his eyes, when he looked down at Ren, went soft in the only way she had seen them go soft. And Ren, satisfied, leaned his head against her hip and stayed. Adele said, from across the circle, "Well, that's all of it then," in the dry way of women who have seen a great many circles close. Norwood smiled. The smile was a thin smile, nothing like the laugh she remembered. It would be a long time before he laughed again, if ever. She had accepted that on the ride back. She had named the cost. Her brother was alive and changed, and would never again be the boy who had laughed too loud at his own jokes. Her gift was awake and would not settle quiet, and the rest of her life would be the long work of carrying it without becoming what Shirley had wanted to make of her. She had traded the marsh girl she had thought she would die as for the woman she had become in 7 nights, and the trade was not even, and she did not pretend it was. The fire burned down. The moon, which had been the old culling moon, became simply a moon. Adele packed up the bread and the wine. The 14 people from the stalls drifted back to the cart and the tents that had been pitched for them in the alder. Norwood put his hand briefly on Athena's shoulder and went to sit beside the cart. Ren fell asleep against her side. Kratos lifted Ren in his arms, carefully, the way he had lifted him off the saddle the first day, and carried him to the tent, and laid him on the bedroll, and came back to the fire. He sat beside her on the worn log. The cold place where her heartbeat used to be was still. It would be still for the rest of her life. She had stopped thinking of it as an absence. She thought of it now as a depth.
She turned her face against Kratos' shoulder and rested it there.
He put his hand over hers. Neither of them spoke. The fire fell to coals. Somewhere up the hill, an owl called once and was answered. The 7 nights of the old culling moon were done. There's something about the way she walked off that platform that I find really hard to shake. The chain in his hand, and her chin at exactly the angle of someone who had already decided not to thank him for it. If you were Athena in that moment, knowing what she didn't yet know about the man holding the other end of the chain, would you have spoken first? Or would you have waited him out the way she did? I'd love to know what you think. See you in the next story.